Hello, Year 11. This is a quick podcast for you on Bruce Dawes context for your upcoming assessment task. So, firstly, Bruce Dawe was born in 1930 in Geelong in Victoria, and he's one of Australia's biggest selling poets. Through his life, he's held many jobs. He was a labourer, he was a postman, he went to university. He tried his hand at university a couple of times. He went to high school, which was not a common thing at that time in Australia. He didn't finish high school. He went on to night school and managed to matriculate, and then he went to university and dropped out at one point. At which point he went and joined the Royal Australian Air Force and became an Air Force officer. And then on his return home from Vietnam War, he went back to university and studied English and then went on to become a teacher. He is also a father. And what is particularly important about all of this is all of these jobs that he has held and his role as a father, his role as a son, and as an uncle has allowed him to get to know ordinary Australians, as we call them. He has a real understanding of the working class people of Australia, the Aussie battlers, and all those vernacular or idiom terms that we use to explain the ordinary Australian. And that all comes out in his poetry. It really comes out in life cycle and in to enter without so much as knocking as well. So we need to also look at not just his context, but what was going on in Australia generally. So as I said earlier, Dawe was born in 1930. Now, globally, the Great Depression has started. It started in 1929 and continued until 1939, until pretty much the outbreak of the Second World War. In Australia, by 1932, unemployment in Australia had risen to 29%. Around the four largest economies in the world, unemployment had hit 30 million people. And the unemployment in those larger economies had a flow-on effect for Australia. Our biggest exports at the time were wool and wheat, and we were no longer able to export these goods because the four biggest economies that usually purchased our exports were no longer buying. And as a result, there was no longer jobs in Australia for all of those people. It was also rare at the time for females to work. It was the role of the man to be the breadwinner, to bring in the money, and that idea, also the pressure for the male to be the sole breadwinner, does come out in his poetry quite a bit. But as a result of the Depression, Dawe and his family moved around a lot, and they were known as drifters. And this idea of moving constantly actually does come out in his poem Drifters. And Drifters explores the different reactions the family members have to moving around, the excitement of the children, the dog getting underfoot in the excitement of packing up and getting ready to move. But more importantly, the mother's withering vitality, this this loss of energy and of life as a result of what is going on. And then after all this and through all this, you then had the start of World War II in 1939. We jump forward in time and we now have the Vietnam War. Um, the Vietnam War was in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and it was a problematic time for Australia. Not everybody agreed with the war. Not everybody felt that we had the right to be there or that we should be there. People were questioning what was going on. And I know we've discussed in class that the reaction after the war went on for a long time. It was a very long time before Vietnam vets were allowed to march in the Anzac Day marches. It was a war that people did not want to know about and did not want people to be at. Conscription came in where people were being forced to go to the war, and there was a lot of protests occurring in Australia at the time. Whilst this was all going on, Dawe had joined the RAF, the Royal Australian Air Force, because, as he says, he wanted companionship more than anything. So there's this idea that he's feeling lonely and that this is what he wants to go. But we also know that his fiancée at the time was also in the RAF. Um, you then have his two poems, Homecoming and Weapons Training, revealing this particular context, not just Dawe's personal context, but also the context of Australia for this. Weapons training is about the defence training and the regimentation that takes place when you first join up for the Defence Forces. And it explores that humiliating experience that goes on. And it also reveals an element of dehumanization when the heads are shaved, when they all have to line up, and they start to go through the humiliating aspect of learning how to fire their weapons and how to fight in the war. Homecoming then follows on from this and takes that dehumanization even further and reflects on the waste of life caused by the war. So both poems really explore the futility of war and the loss of humanity. Uh, so by the time they join up, the way, if you were to just look at the two poems together, you have one poem taking them, removing that humanity and humiliating them as they start up for the war, and then, as we know, they're just identified by their hair, and it's just countless bodies in green bags coming home from the war. Okay, I will do some more podcasts on the poems themselves at a later date to help you get ready for your assessment task.